Oh, yeah, buddy.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yes, and the same right back at you. So are you telling me, based on our headline and some of the articles that you sent me, well, two of them anyway, that maybe we're being sold a bill of goods as to how green EVs really are? Is that really the case? Have we been duped?
Yes and no.
Okay, let's start with the yes.
So the case is, and this is, they've talked to several people here, and this comes around because the EPA is calling for new tailpipe emissions, right?
Okay.
And they're very, very strict. They want 82 grams of CO2 per mile by 2032. Currently, it's 400 grams. So it's a pretty big
pretty
significant
reduction. Yes.
Yeah. So per mile, currently the only one who would meet that would be Tesla.
Of course.
However,
yes,
as what we're finding out is on both sides of this issue, what they're doing is they're saying, well, but mining puts all this extra CO2 into the air, and you're hurting the earth. Plus, then you got to get all those minerals to the place where they're making the batteries, and you got to get all the batteries to the place. And a lot of this is on ships who are using diesel fuel and going across. So it's all of that added into here. And what it comes down to is nobody knows. What it comes down to is nobody's done individual studies on these brands. Nobody's done the actual environmental impact on each steps of these. They're using sort of general numbers. So, and I knew this was already going to happen. We have both sides of the debate going on already. And it's not that EVs have lied, and it's not that they're so much worse or so much better. It's that everybody's guesstimating. Everyone's like, well, we think it's doing about this. But nobody has the processes in place to track the batteries specifically over time. So, is Tesla better than Ford on that? What's GM like? Where are they all getting their individual minerals? How far is it going on shipping and this and that? Right now, their guesstimate is that over the life of the vehicle, EVs still save 50% of the emissions, even when you're counting it up. It just, most of it's up front, right? Rather than on the back end. But again, that's a guesstimate. It could be that EVs are 75% better than ICE vehicles. It could be that they're exactly the same. In the end, everyone's just guessing, and nobody has these processes in place to know for sure.
And so the likelihood is that we won't really have an answer to this in my lifetime.
This was on.
Let's assume I live another 18 years. Do you think we might actually have a legitimate answer to this question by, say, 2041?
I do. I think the answer to this question will probably be in the next 5 to 7 years, is my guess, is that they're going to start putting some processes in place to track. Now, how quickly that information comes to the public's eye might be a little bit different. Anyone out here in California today with the news of the secret labs in Fresno and stuff know that not everything that happens comes to the public eye. So we want to, you never know what's going on in the background.
What happened in Fresno?
Oh, yeah. So apparently down in Fresno, they had secret biomedical labs, illegal biomedical labs, where they were injecting rats and mice with COVID and E. coli and salmonella and a few other things. And just a general inspector had been going through the warehouse district over there, stumbled upon the plant, and then sort of went out and told everybody, and all the government regulations came in to shut it down. But then now there's new leaked memos from the state EPA saying, let's not let the public know what's going on. They're all walking around in biosuits. Let's not give out addresses. Let's not let them know because we don't want to create unnecessary questions.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
but that's
Did they
how
get did they get the rats to like sign off on these injections?
I doubt it. I doubt it. But yeah, I know. Yeah, they're all over the place. These were the people running this lab were exactly who you think they were. But it just sort of this kind of tying this into what we may or may not learn about the effectiveness of EVs. It seems like when there's a plan or an agenda in place, the answers may not come out. So I do question on this. Do we really not know? Or are we just saying, I guess we're just guessing, but the numbers may actually still be there somewhere.
Wow. Interesting stuff. My guess is we never know, and it's just this a big ass assumption that that in the long run this just has to be better. Okay, we're assuming, we're buying into that assumption that, well, it just has to be better. Let's. I hope they're right. I don't know that they're right. Nobody really knows if they're right. I do know, or I seem to understand. I won't say that I do know, but I seem to understand that EVs are require less maintenance than ICE vehicles. They certainly don't require oil changes, and I'm getting they don't require tune-ups, and they probably don't have a carburetor or fuel injectors. So so I understand that there's less repairs and less maintenance required to own a EV at the present time. There's significant savings charging the vehicle electrically than over putting gasoline or diesel fuel into internal combustion engines. But one would assume, this is just a silly ass assumption, but one would assume that as more and more EVs are out there, that the cost benefit savings of electric over gas or diesel will probably equalize at some point, and there won't really be the savings for having gone electric as far as the cost to fuel a vehicle. But right now there's that savings. I mean, is with the damage, with what they have to do to mine the lithium and the other thing. I mean, who knows? It's all a giant ass assumption, a big ass assumption, and a hope.
Well, and one thing about those assumptions that we're also assuming, though, is over time, as you know, most of a battery can be recycled, like 95% right now, working on getting that to 99% recycled. So as more vehicles come on the road, you'll eventually have more batteries to recycle, and the mining will go down dramatically.
Well,
eventually someday.
Here's a question for you.
And John says, yes, rubber's rubber. Tires are always going to be tires, and that requires fuel.
But here's a question. A lot of the batteries are lithium-based, lithium ion. Your batteries for most of your electronic devices are lithium ion. Mm-hmm. What happens to those batteries now? Do they get recycled?
A lot of them do get recycled. A lot of the batteries, that's why they try to get you to trade them in and stuff, because a lot of those batteries will get recycled. Now, while they are all lithium ion, they're not quite the same batteries.
I understand, but
yeah, a lot of your phone battery does get recycled. Sometimes they just repair it and recycle it, like the whole
Yeah.
battery. But a lot of times it gets pulled apart and recycled. Those programs are out there. You know, the one thing the advantage that the EV has over your phone is no one's just going to pick up the EV and throw it in the trash and not take it down to get recycled. Where
Well,
a
you
lot
don't
of
know
people
that.
just,
You don't know that. You're just assuming.
yeah, I'm assuming you're not going to pick it up and put it in a dumpster. Um,
Yeah, but some people just might leave it in the yard. I mean, I've driven
yeah,
past houses
yeah,
where
yeah, that's
there's
true.
30, 40, 50-year-old cars just sitting in the yard. Um,
Yeah,
thankfully I don't drive past them often. Um, but that's not to say that, EV owners wouldn't end up doing the same thing.
I mean,
But
yeah, I mean, there will be those owners, but like most cars still go to a scrap yard or something else, and so they'll, there's parts pulled off of them all the time, pick and pull and all that stuff, and the batteries will get yanked out by. There's already a lot of battery recycling companies in the United States alone.
of
Someone will come out as big.
of all the lithium that is needed for EVs and personal electronics, what is the percentage of, and this is probably a question you don't have an answer to. I treat you like the Shell
Yeah.
answer man, like you should just know all this stuff. Um, but what do you think the percentage of lithium that goes towards personal electronics in comparison to the percentage of lithium that goes into the batteries for EVs? Um, because it seems to me that personal electronics are have a greater availability to a larger percentage of the population than EVs do.
Yeah. So the average EV has 8 kilograms of lithium.
Okay, and the
Um,
average iPhone.
yep, and that's where I'm.
I know where you're going.
That's where I'm trying to be. Uh, much less than 8 kilograms.
It better.
And they're
But
estimating about, yeah. So
so
that the phone battery has less than 3/100th of an ounce.
okay. So
So
you're telling me next to nothing.
yeah, almost nothing. Almost nothing.
Okay. But when you times it by the millions of phones that get made and sold, that turns into a relatively large number.
Yeah. And MK has a point here, is how much fresh water is being
Yeah.
used to process the lithium mines. And once that water is used, of course, it's caustic and unusable. That is certainly one aspect I don't think a ton of people look at. I think I've made that argument here on the show before too, is one thing that we don't have a whole ton of is fresh water everywhere in the world.
Yes.
And we sure could use some more.
Yeah, isn't the lithium that's mined in Chile, isn't that like water based, if I
Yeah,
remember correctly? Yeah,
correct.
yeah. So I mean, there's drawbacks to all this stuff. I mean, now do the benefits of having gone through all that and produced these batteries for electric vehicles, does that outweigh the drawback? And
Right
once
now they're saying it's a 50% savings over the life of a vehicle. Again, that's more of a guesstimate. It could be much
yeah,
better. I don't know. It could be much worse. It could be much better. I think a lot of people are sort of digging their heels in on their opinion, but and the truth is nobody really knows right now.
yeah.
At least publicly, nobody really knows right now. And it could go either way. It really could go. It could be much, much better than that, or it could be much worse.
Here's what I'll equate it to if I can. Um, there were drugs that were produced in the 50s that, everybody raved about, modern science, saving humanity. And women took those drugs and they cause birth defects. So oftentimes, I won't say oftentimes, but many times, there are unintended consequences that we aren't necessarily aware of at the time. So that what we're doing with electric vehicles, we think, it's cutting edge and we think it's just terrific and it's just incredible stuff, but we have no idea yet as to what the unintended consequences are of these actions. As to, 20 years from now, we find out we have one of those oh shit moments where they go, whoo, wish we hadn't done that. And that could be a real possibility. I mean, because nobody thought what they were doing when they were coming up with certain drugs and stuff in the 50s was going to have one of those moments, but they did, and we still do today to different things. So
absolutely, and I will tell you, I mean, let's be honest, ICE vehicles are awful for the planet, for humans, in every possible conceivable way. They're just horrible every way around. Our health, the planet's health, everything. So that's one that has come and has hit, and we have all sort of just gone like, well, that's what it is, and we move on. But it's not like it's better than some of those drugs. You can't sit behind your car and suck in tailpipe fumes. And if you can't do that, what do you think the billions of cars on the planet are doing?
You could, if you take the Beltway and the Washington, Baltimore metropolitan areas, you definitely will. I can assure you of that, especially in the mornings and late afternoons. How is this all going to play? I mean, because tailpipe emissions aren't just on cars. They're on motorcycles and motor scooters as well. And there are many countries, developing countries, that don't have nearly as much dependence on automobiles as they do on motorcycles and motor scooters.
Yeah,
and
I've been to Vietnam. I will tell you, hard to find a car
and
there.
I'm just guessing that those things pump out more emissions. And somebody said in lawnmowers, Jared, thank you.
Jared, we're getting rid of those in California anyway.
But I got to believe those things pump out more emissions than a car would, than an ICE vehicle would. How do we deal with that in developing countries where, people really have, and God, it almost sounds like the United States at this point, people really have a limited income to deal with to be able to buy things. And we see it with automobiles in this country right now, where there's that great chasm between those who can afford to buy cars and trucks and those who can't, and that chasm is getting bigger. How does this play out in countries where they're basically emerging nations with really poor economies and little to no money for the population to spend?
Well, I mean, and this has been a pushback and argument in the UN and a lot of the anti-climate accords people's argument, which is, okay, let's say the US goes to zero emissions.
Yes.
We're such a small part of the global emissions. And China is getting better, but they're still way outside of us. And a lot of these emerging nations are, worse than we've been in 30, 40 years. So it's like, okay, we cut, but what are we doing? Is it really going to have any environment? If we're talking about saving the planet,
yes.
Like, what is the impact of the U.S. going to zero while everybody else is, not everybody, but, the emerging nations and everything are trying to get on their feet, and they can't just go to zero emissions. They're like, that's not realistic for them. And look at what happened with the Russia oil embargo, right? We said, we're not going to buy Russian oil. Well, they found a new buyer really, really, really quick, and who are buying even more. So, and that's sort of what's going to go on here is, even if the U.S. and Western Europe all go to zero emissions, how much are we saving in that? Because, and it's, yes, Sarah, it's net zero, not total zero. What is the environmental impact on all that going to be? Because there are more people growing. As the U.S. population or birth rate is shrinking, right? So most of our growth is coming from immigrants now, from transplants.
Yes.
There are countries on Earth whose population is growing. So those will be the developing nations, and what happens in those situations.
And I think the reality is that there are many more poor nations than there are wealthy nations.
Yep.
I believe the reason that it's the G7 is because they're like the 7 largest economies in the world. They're the rich nations,
Yep.
of which there are many, but there are many, 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 many more that are not. And I guess the theory is that, well, if we could get all the rich nations and the quasi-rich nations to buy into this, then it can have an impact. But if the poor nations can't buy into it because they're just such emerging economies and countries, that is it really going to matter in the long run?
Yeah. So to put that in context, because I looked it up while you were asking, there are 195 countries in the world.
Okay.
And NATO lists 31 of them as first world nations.
Okay, it seems to me the vast majority then are not.
Yeah. So, 31. So that would be
164.
Yeah. So 16% of the world is little under 16% is a first world or rich nation, and 84% are struggling developing nations. So,
okay, and those countries, if I could be so bold, those countries don't really give a rat's behind about emissions and any of that stuff. They're just trying to figure out how to survive on a day-to-day basis, let alone go, oh my God, we got to figure out how to cut the emissions out of the,
When your number one concern is clean water and food,
yes,
you could not possibly care less about the emissions that you're emitting.
Yes.
And it'll be many, many decades before you even slightly care when your family's hungry and thirsty at home. And
so here's the extrapolation that I take out of that. I could be wrong, I could be right. I don't know. But if only 16% of the world's nations are first world countries, and they want to try and impact climate change through reducing emissions, and 84% of the nations out there really don't give a damn and really don't find themselves in a position to do anything about it.
Yeah.
How's that math going to work? I mean, is there enough that can be done by those 31 countries that can offset what can't be done by the other 164 nations that don't find themselves in a position to be able to participate?
I mean, I don't know how much they can do. I also don't know how much of the population is there. I'm just trying to.
I guess the real question I'm asking.
Oh yeah. So sorry, I was looking up China and India to see where they land on that list, whether they're first world or not.
Yes.
And because then you would figure into population, like, okay, but if it's only 16, but those sick or only 31 nations, but most of the population lies with them. But no, China and India are not, according to NATO, first world nations. They're second and third world.
Doesn't China have the the second or third largest economy in the world.
Second, and very quickly coming up onto the first. Yeah.
But they're not
So,
a first world nation.
yeah. So
No.
I'm not sure. Yeah. And let me check when this was
I,
written, because
but the extrapolation that I was going to make is that, have we been sold a bill of goods about how we'll actually be able to impact through emissions and things like that, the impending climate crisis?
well,
Is there really anything that we can do about it? And we've just been, by a lot of, I think, fair-minded people with good intentions, that we're just being sold a bill of goods because there's not enough participants to be able to really make it matter.
well. So let me play devil's advocate on that
Okay,
and say,
that's why we do this.
yeah, that is why we do this. But this is going to probably get me in some hot water, but I'm going to say it anyway.
Okay.
Are we being sold a bill of goods on how much we're contributing to the change in the climate in the first place? And what if we're not really contributing that much to it? Of course, we're contributing. We're human
Yes.
beings. We're on this planet. But what if all of our collective contributions really aren't that big of a deal, and it's not really hurting much? So where is the bill of goods being sold first? And are we trying to solve a problem that we can't solve? And I'm not taking a stance one way or the other on that, because I try to keep an open mind, and I can kind of
Yes.
see both sides of that. Definitely, I look into it a lot, and every time I find one point, I find another, and it gets kind of frustrating.
Yes.
But are we being sold a bill of goods with EVs? I ask, well, are we being sold a bill of goods on saving the planet in the first place? And I did hear a few people, when I go down that rabbit hole, saying, well, it's not the planet we're trying to save, it's humanity. The planet will be fine. It's going to go on just fine without us. It's whether we survive through it or not.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what that is. I don't know what that answer is. So I don't know. I question the legitimacy of both of how much damage is being done, and is this really the solution to that being done? Or is this all about that great thing that everything is always about, Ray? Is it all about money?
Because you got to believe, as human beings, we impact what's going on.
Yeah.
To the planet. You have to assume that there's some validity to that.
Yeah, we're part of the ecosystem, and
yes,
everything changes. Yeah.
And then you have to question whether or not we can really affect the impact that we're having, because there's just not a lot of countries that can participate. So I don't know. I think they're all good-hearted people on perhaps both sides of the debate as to whether we can or we can't do anything about it. I don't, I just don't know. And it's, when we start looking at some of these things, it at least in my mind, it gets me thinking, well, what's going on here or what's going on there? Can we really impact or have an effect? That
and if we're not sure, do we just throw our hands up and not do anything?
Maybe.
Or do we keep trying and then hope like hell that it's not the situation you described earlier, where in 20 years we go, oops, that made everything a lot worse. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I just I don't know. And there's a comment here, and I'm going to pull it up and I'm going to answer it. Okay. Ray, I hope you feel the same. If your doctor finds cancer and tells you that since you are old and going to die anyway, don't bother with any treatment. Having lost a
Yeah.
father to cancer, having lost my wife to cancer, having seen how their lives deteriorated while trying all the treatments that were available. And I'll say this, and it's going to piss my children off when I say this. But if they found cancer in me and they said, well, we could try to do this and it might extend your life, or we could do nothing and you could just try and have whatever remaining time you have and spend it with your family and try and have as much quality life as you can before the end comes. I'm going with the latter. Okay, because I've watched it, I've lived through it. And I know the pain that the patient goes through, and I know the pain that the family goes through. And I can tell you, people who get treatment who end up not surviving, that pain for both the patient and the family is longer than it might have been had they chosen not to take the treatments. So I get what people are saying with that question that they asked me, but
Yeah. Well,
I,
and that's sort of what I was saying. Like, we don't necessarily throw our hands up and go, you know, but look, cancer treatment now versus 50 years ago, a lot different.
yes,
More people survive, more people live longer, but it's still not perfect. There's still, as you said, there's still a lot of suffering involved in it and a lot of it. But that doesn't mean we don't keep working to try to solve cancer.
no, and
Right.
I'm not
And I
saying
know
we
you're not
shouldn't.
saying that.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I had a conversation the other day with um, a member of our community, and he's a pediatric oncologist, and I couldn't even begin to imagine what that's like when you're dealing with young children who have cancer, and how much you want to be able to make a difference, and in many cases not really be able to. um, I can't imagine, um, from the scientific perspective of that, how frustrating that must be. um, so I mean, I get it, and I get choices that we sometimes have to make in life, and so I are we being sold a bill of goods when it comes to some of these cancer treatments? Perhaps.
Probably. Yeah.
Yeah, perhaps.
Why would
Is
you
there
think you
money in
weren't?
it for the pharmaceutical companies? Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
And not to get super controversial again, but if you've watched the British hearings on the vaccines, um, that we all took,
Mhm.
um, yeah, there were some bills of goods being sold on some of that too. Like, not saying that they were all useless, but there are definitely things that were said that have come out and been like, well, no, and so I think that everything's sort of like this. And Jared has a good point. I say this all the time.
Yeah.
Too many people look at stuff on a lifetime scale. Let me tell you how many people I run into on a daily basis that don't know anything before their own lifetime. They just don't. And you
Mhm.
can't look at all this stuff and go, well, this is what I've seen in my 40 years on Earth.
Yeah.
Like, well, Earth has been around a lot longer. Humans have been around a lot longer. Maybe study a lot more of that, because it can kind of lead you astray into some of this. And Tiger here says same thing. I drive an EV because I like it. I don't assume I'm helping the Earth in any way. Me too. I did
Yeah.
not buy my EV to
Save the
save the
planet.
planet. That's
Okay,
not
good.
that's not why I bought my EV. Do I hope that it's better for the environment than all my old ICE cars? Of course, I hope it's better. I sure do. I don't want it to be worse.
Yes.
And I think definitely, obviously, on the emissions of me driving it, it's better. Um, over its lifetime, I don't know. But that's not why I bought it. I bought it because I really like the vehicle, and there's lots of stuff I love about it. But certainly, if I was going to buy a vehicle to save the planet, I don't think there's enough information out there. And I think the right people are starting to ask the right questions now about okay, what is the real savings? What
Mhm.
is it? What are we going to? Because it's obvious when you're driving it at that point. Once I start driving it, yes, I'm saving versus the ICE vehicle. It's everything before that
Yes.
that's such the big question.
A question we'll never be able to answer.
Well, I mean, maybe someday.
Yeah. Well,
Maybe
when
someday.
I meant
But
will, I meant you and I.
yes, no, probably not. Probably not.
Yeah. Or if you want, maybe you will, but I sure as hell won't ever be able to answer. So it's a question I'll never be able to answer, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, it's really an interesting conundrum, I guess is the best way to put it. We don't know if we're doing good, we're doing bad. We just know we're
Yeah.
doing something.
Well,
Um,
I know I always say, like you said, I think both sides, people with good hearts, with good intentions, trying to make the best decisions possible on limited data, sometimes on flawed data,
yes,
and what they're trying to do. But there's that old saying, Ray, about good intentions.
I think the road to hell is paved with them, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
so that still is out there.
yeah, yeah,
But
absolutely.
it is about time for your lunch, I believe.
It is indeed, and Igor, I believe today's lunch is some brisket, sliced brisket with Cooper Sharp American cheese and some radish sauce on rye bread. So that
I
that
will
is
have one of
today's.
those as well, please.
I don't blame you. It's damn
Yeah,
good.
that sounds amazing.
Yes, yes, and that is from my favorite little supermarket in Margate called Castles, and that the store that people refer to as the future store, in the sense if you want to know what future prices are going to be 5 years from now, well then shop at Castles today, and you will know what the prices will be 5 years from now. So yeah,
Yeah, that sounds about right.
their brisket, their Castle's own cooked brisket. You ready for this? You're sitting down. You're sitting down. Okay, $29.99 a pound. Okay,
Oh,
I mean,
jeez.
it's
Wait a
like
minute.
crazy. It's
Yeah,
good. Is it worth $29.99 a pound? Probably not. But
that just so start figuring out how many of those sandwiches you eat in a year, and
yeah.
figure out how much a pellet grill and a full brisket costs.
Yeah,
And
but
you may
here's
just want to be out there, out back of those blinds, and just smoking your own brisket, Ray.
my problem is that we're not allowed to grill here
Oh,
at the condo. You're not allowed to put a grill out on your balcony. Um, so it's
such
$29.99
a
a pound
shame.
or nothing for me.
Such a shame. Such a shame. And Evan wants to know, do we have a new food show coming?
Perhaps you just never
CarEdge
know.
food?
I mean, there's people that want us to have a watch show so
Yeah.
that we can review the various watches that I have. Um, I don't want to say I'm a sellout, but if there's money in it, I just might
Yeah.
do it. No.
We should have a movie and dinner show
We
where we talk
should.
about the food and the movies. That would be a kind of show I could watch. I could
Yeah,
do. I could get
yeah.
on with
No,
that
and you
boardroom.
would be good at it. Yeah.
Yeah,
You
I
would be
couldn't talk
absolutely good
about
at
watches. I have one watch.
it.
It's right
Okay. Well,
here. It's a lovely
okay.
watch.
Well, I have 31 watches, uh, and I have room for one more, and I keep holding off. I haven't bought the 32nd watch yet, um, and my guess is I probably won't, because the whole concept behind this is I always figured, well, the more watches you have, the more time you have, and I think that's flawed thinking.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm pretty sure when your time's up, it's up on all watches
Eh,
at the same
Well,
time.
or my guess is I won't really care
Yeah,
on those, but that's besides the point.
yeah.
Yes, yeah. So
All right. You have a lovely lunch. We
Well,
will be back
thank you very
here
much. And
on Friday.
yes, I'm looking forward to it. So,
With I don't know. We're talking. I know Mr. Phil will be here.
okay.
So
And
Fridays with
maybe one
Phil.
day we can get Justin back.
Yep. He will. I will not let him miss what are we at? Today's show 73.
Okay.
So he has 27 more shows before I'm forcing him back on, no matter what, because he needs to be here for the 100. I asked him a couple weeks ago again, and it was still a no-go. So, but I am continuously pressuring him.
We have to let him know that there are many people out there that he impacted, that appreciated his knowledge and his wisdom. And just because he chose to have another child is no reason to cut those hundreds of people out of his life that were depending and hanging on his every word. I don't want him to take, but that was almost selfish of him.
I know, and I don't think that was good for the environment, having another child.
Well, I know it's not, because they're probably using Pampers and stuff, and those poopy diapers are definitely not good for the environment. Yeah.
I agree. I want Justin back on Fridays. I want him here, because a lot of those questions you ask me, he would probably just know.
Yes,
and he doesn't have to Google them while you're asking.
Oh, well, we'll see what we can do. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. And yes, we need to have them both on more often.
Yep.
Yeah.
Space more as well. I agree.
Yeah.
Mario's always welcome as well.
I'll see you on Friday, my friend.
All right. See everyone on Friday. Have a good day.
Yep.